Have you ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix? Consider sending it my way. I'd love to read it for a video. And, of course, thank you for your time. Having binge-listened to a large portion of the Glitch in the Matrix stories here on the As the Raven Dreams channel, I thought I would share just a smidge of my reality-shifting life. The first thing I want to make clear is that glitches in the Matrix are very much a part of the phenomenon known as the Mandela effect. I've been disappointed to hear people being rejected from Mandela effect pages as not relevant. A change in your reality is a Mandela effect. And there are many wonderful channels online if you're interested in connecting with people just like you who have extraordinary experiences. That being said, for me, middle-aged woman from England, it began in 2015. For me, McDonald's changed to McDonald's, and someone pulled me up for my spelling, which I laughed at first. But then I began to notice that all of the McDonald's fronts changed from red to green. I mean all of them. No disruption to the service while painters up and down the country rushed to paint the fronts of all the premises. They just simply changed suddenly to green. I did mention it to people who didn't seem to notice or care, and I just went along with it. That was the beginning of years of wondering why certain logos and brand names had changed. And it wasn't until 3 years later that I had my next encounter with reality. I was walking through my hometown with my grandson. Now, bear in mind, my hometown is very old and has buildings of historical importance. The chief judge in the regicide of Charles I lived there, and we have something called blue plaques which adorn buildings of national importance nationwide. As we were walking down the main street, I noticed a beautiful black iron plaque about 18 inches long, embedded in the ground outside of a shop which was circa 1400. The plaque outlined the long history of the shop in beautiful gilt writing. "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" I exclaimed, adding, "The council have surpassed themselves there." We walked across the road to the 500-year-old pub where the chief regicide of the king worked and served his articles. The building has a blue plaque on the wall because, of course, this is a building of national importance. As we crossed the road, I could see that there, embedded in the pavement, was another splendid black plaque, stating the history of the building. I commented to my grandson that it's beautiful, but that building already has the blue plaque and it says the same thing. We walked on, discussing the town's history. A few days later, I was walking past another building which now sits beside the bypass, but had been the town's registry office. My youngest daughter had been registered there before it was shut, and the registry moved out of town. It was now a wedding boutique. I didn't know anything more about the history of the building until I noticed the black plaque sitting outside of the building. Again, embedded in the pavement. Again, in beautiful gilt writing. The plaque told me that it had once been a cottage hospital, built in 1866. I admired the plaque and was happy with the new knowledge that it had given me. I don't live in my hometown, and it was a number of weeks before I was, once again, walking through my town center. I walked round the corner and stopped in my tracks. No black plaque. I rushed towards where I had clearly seen it embedded, and there was nothing there. And I mean, nothing. No mark in the pavement to indicate it had ever been there at all. Nothing. Not a silch. The two other plaques had also disappeared with no sign of their existence at all. I don't know what the bloody hell was going on. I didn't know about the Mandela effect or glitches in the Matrix at that point, and I told my husband what had happened. He thought I had just had a dream. I explained that the plaques had been there over the course of a few months, and that I read that the wedding dress shop on the bypass was the cottage hospital built in 1866. How could I know that from a dream? He thinks I had a psychic dream. He worried my daughter about it. I visited the town hall to find out some history about the building, and sure enough, it was the cottage hospital built in 1866. There have been uncountable changes in reality. Glitches in the Matrix, Mandela effects, same thing. Why and how? Nobody knows. But some big stuff is going down, and we're in it together. Share the love, beautiful people, and thank you for your time. Whatever that is. I'm reposting this story because it's been over 4 years since I last shared it. I've been binging this sub recently and thought I would take a shot at getting some more opinions. Sorry for the length, but I wanted to be as detailed as possible. Bear with me because I feel like it's worth it. Hopefully. Okay. So this happened to me about 6 years ago. 2 years at the time of writing this. It really freaked me out at the time, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I still can't, but after finding this sub, I figured I would share it with y'all and see if you can shed some light. I want to preface the story that this happened right around New Year's, a couple of years back. At the time, a large group of some old friends had taken a road trip together from the East Coast to visit myself and some other friends here in Colorado. There were about 14 of them that all caravanned out to stay for a week and to celebrate New Year's in Denver. A couple of days in, everyone decided to all go get food and drinks from this place in Denver, so I took the 40-minute drive from where I live to meet up with them. I drove up to the restaurant and parked my car outside on the side of the street. Everyone was already inside. I turned my car off and got out only to realize I didn't have my wallet. I unlocked and opened the car back up and grabbed my wallet off of the passenger seat. Then I closed the driver's door once again. This is where things get weird. This time, when I reached for my keys to relock the car, it wasn't in my pocket, where I could have sworn I had just placed it. I started to check around my other pockets, but it was nowhere to be found. I checked the driver's seat, passenger's seat, and even the back seat, but nothing. Then I thought to myself, what if it fell on the ground when I got out of the car? Maybe it was on my lap. I look on the ground to find a big, dirty, slushy puddle of water from snowmelt that my car is parked in. At this point, I decide to get an empty 24-ounce coffee cup out of the back seat and start sifting through the water to try to see if it fell in. After about 20 to 30 minutes of sifting through this disgusting water, I give up and go inside to meet my pals. By this time, I'm like 45 minutes late to meet them because I've spent the whole time outside looking for my key. I tell them about the situation, and we all agree that it's definitely somewhere in my car, and to not worry about it too much. We all get food for about another 45 minutes, and then we decide to split. We leave, and about 10 of them, that's not an exaggeration here, came outside to my car to help me look inside and around my car. We all searched high and low, tearing my car apart, looking for that key, but still nothing. After a good 30 minutes, we called it off and someone gave me a lift back to my house. I had to call a tow truck to bring my car home because that was my only key. The next day, I had a locksmith come to my house and make me 2 new keys, just plain metal, non-electric ones with no fob. I used one and kept the other in my house. Fast forward about 2 months down the line, My friend and I are at my house and decide to go somewhere. I can't remember where, and we hop in my car. He jumps in the passenger seat, and I in the driver's. While I'm getting my things in order, I see him reach under his butt and proceed to pull something out from under him that he's sitting on. Lo and behold, he pulls out the electronic key that disappeared 2 months earlier, just right off the passenger seat. It's important to note that this is not a friend who I had been with at all during the time of losing the key. In fact, he wasn't even in the state that week, and I'm pretty sure he knew nothing about me losing it in the first place. For the life of me, I cannot understand how it got there. I know it wasn't there earlier that day or even that month. I would have seen it either cleaning out my car, or one of my 10 friends who had helped me search would have seen it sitting there. The crazy thing is, a bunch of other people have ridden in my car post losing that key, and pre-friend sitting on it. Nobody else had ever noticed anything was there under their back end. I don't get what happened, but I know that dang key was not just sitting on that seat for 2 months. I'm positive of it. I was dumbfounded at the time, and I, honestly, 6 years later, still am. I've since reconciled the fact sometimes we experience glitches in the Matrix, and it's often best to not overthink it. Otherwise, I'll just drive myself insane. I am curious to hear what y'all's opinions are, or similar experiences have been. As a child, I used to entertain this fantasy. I'm assuming the majority of people space out from time to time. However subtle or severe this semi-unconscious occurrence is presented, it's both unique to the individual and similar to the experiences of others. With that understanding, you can also identify the feeling of snapping out of it, or the moment when the zoning out ends and the alertness returns to leave you asking yourself, where was I? And how long was I there? To put it broadly, as an adult, it is more so an avalanche of thoughts that I can actually recollect. But as a child, it was more like waking up from a nap. I used to imagine that when this would happen, that the whole world was being paused. Everyone and everything was motionless, unaware, and unable to sense this pause the world over. It may have lasted a couple of seconds or a whole day, but everyone experienced it simultaneously and snapped out of it at the same time, then continuing about their lives without noticing. Everyone except me, of course. I grew up in southwest Michigan / northwest Indiana, and my family has 200 acres in Knox, Indiana, Toto Road for reference, that we use mainly for hunting. We hunt mornings and nights for 2 weeks straight when deer season arrives in November, only making occasional trips to town for necessities or dinner at a restaurant some nights. This leaves afternoons wide open for hanging out and doing absolutely nothing. One day, when I was 16, me and my cousin were talking and playing catch with the bouncy ball out in the drive in front of the cabin after the morning hunt, and we were probably about 75 yards apart. All of a sudden, he stops and turns around. He looks confused, and after about 30 seconds of watching him turn in curious circles, I started shouting something along the lines of, "What are you doing?" He started walking towards me, looking around quizzically. He got close to me before his bewildered gaze was then focused on me. He whispered, "Do you hear how quiet it is out here?" I laughed at how serious he came across at first. I was imagining something much more urgent seconds earlier as he approached me, but his demeanor ceased to budge, and without words demanded my full attention to his question. We stood there and stared at the ground. It was quiet. A quiet like I've never experienced before or since. This wasn't just quiet, this was an absolute absence of sound. As I realized he wasn't just joking around, my hair stood on end from the top of my head and I got chills through my arms. Indiana is flat. You can hear cars and trucks from a mile away out in the country. When there's no cars around, the air is still filled with the noise of cicadas, birds, leaves in the wind. There was no wind, no wildlife, no motion to the surrounding area whatsoever. The universe, in this moment, was unnervingly still and lifeless. So much that the leaves and the trees were frozen in time. You could have heard a pin drop in the sand. And this persisted, and we stood there exploring this moment for 5 minutes tops, not moving a muscle, let alone speaking and interrupting the pure silence. As quickly as it set on, a gust of wind that started weak and grew in strength gave way to a truck rumbling in the distance, and the familiar hum of insects and leaves rustling all around us. And this was perhaps even more unsettling, as the noise made the silence feel all the more real. This story is 100% true, and I would like to know if anyone here has experienced anything similar. Since I stumbled on this topic, I've been searching my memory for weird things that might have been called a glitch. Now, keep in mind that I'm generally a skeptical person. I'm open to the possibility, though, and I had a eureka moment when my wife brought up something that happened to me about 12 years ago when I was living in Japan. I was about 27 at the time, I think, and I was in the military and living on base with my wife and kids. One evening, I went out with my friends and I saw this amazing, drop-dead gorgeous woman playing pool with her date. That was obviously not going well. We did eventually chat briefly through a mutual friend and introduce ourselves, but besides stealing quick glances as she bent over the pool table for the rest of the evening, I left it alone. She was quite flirty with me, much to the joy of my ego. My friends, I was tempted. I was very tempted. Everything about this woman was my type, but that's okay. That's part of life and part of marriage. The trick is saying no. I think her name was Sarah. She was not drinking, nor was I. In fact, I was the designated driver. At around 11 p.m., I started taking my friends home. She left at the same time and walked home to the building across the street. It was around midnight when I got home and relayed the story of my evening to my wife before we went to bed. Yes, including Sarah. We're married, not dead. The next day, I'm out with my wife picking up some stuff for the house when we run into, you guessed it, Sarah. She walks right up to me, gives me a hug, looks at my wife and goes, "You have the wildest husband. Holy crap, we were out until 7 this morning and I had to drop him off at your front door. I'm amazed he's so pulled together. That was an epic party." I tell her that I went home at the same time she did, that neither of us were drinking and that the evening was overall kind of dull for the both of us. She blushed and gave me this look as my wife glanced away. You know the look. And then she walked away. She then texted me, which I never gave her my number, and said, "Don't worry, I can keep a secret." While I did eventually end up striking a pretty casual friendship with Sarah, the night that she remembers is 100% different from the night that I remember. Talking to her later, she remembers people that weren't there. She said she wasn't on a date, and we spent the whole night getting handsy until we snuck off together and went partying out on the town before landing back at her place to go at it like starved bunnies. Me and my friends remember the same thing. I was sober. My friend Eddie introduced me to Sarah. She and I chatted briefly. But otherwise, I went back with my friends and drove them all home at 11. They remember her being flirty with me when we met, but that was it. My wife still jokes about me going sleep partying after I went to bed that night, because it's still one of the strangest things that happened to us. Well, I guess I'm glad that at least in another universe, I have some serious game. I don't think I've posted this before, but if I have and somehow forgot, my apologies. Boring, relevant info first. I was born in New South Wales, Australia. The capital is Sydney, and my hometown for the first 2 years of my life was a few hours' drive north of Sydney. At the age of 2, my family left New South Wales and moved even further up north to Queensland, putting us many hours in the opposite direction of Sydney, about 18 hours by car. Fast forward to 2013, and I meet a guy in Sydney online, and we start dating. He visits me the first lot of times, and then I went down there to see him. He decided to show me around the markets and other areas. Now, I'd never been to Sydney that I could remember, but suddenly assumed that I must have been because I remembered pretty much everything. The streets, the markets, the roads, I remembered it all. I also remembered riding the monorail, which was opened in 1988 and decommissioned in early 2013. Growing up, I always remembered the experience and my sister being with me while I was on it. It was such a clear memory that I never thought to inquire as to whether it actually happened. When I got back home, I told my mom about seeing everything again, and remembering riding the monorail, and how now it was no longer operating. My mom looked at me strangely, and told me that she had never taken me to Sydney at all, and that while my family lived in New South Wales and moved to Queensland when I was 2, there had never been a trip to Sydney. To this day, I have no idea how I knew my way around Sydney, or how come I remembered riding the monorail with my sister when my family says it never happened. For some bonus weirdness, to add to it, the guy I was dating was quite bizarre, and I ended up believing he was a spy. He had claimed to go by one name and to work in a particular place. Turns out, he had never worked there despite regularly chatting to me about his workplace and the people there in an animated way as if he had. He also claimed to be a school teacher under another name. And at one stage, years after we had broken up, he appeared as a suggested friend on Facebook under yet another name, before that profile quickly disappeared. He also took regular private flights somewhere with people he claimed had offered him money to play poker with, despite the fact that he wasn't actually much of a poker player. So yeah, that was strange. Okay, so this is the only glitch in the Matrix moment I can remember off the top of my head. But even it isn't as exciting as some of the other stories on here, and even though it happened like 3 years ago, I still think about it occasionally. In the bathroom, there is virtually always a small, colorful plastic cup right next to the sink, if you want a small drink of water or to wash out your mouth after brushing your teeth. One night, I went into the bathroom to have a shower, and I noticed that the cup was missing. I thought it was a bit strange, but really thought nothing of it. Our shower is small and is detached from the bath. You can only get in from opening a glass door. Any Australians here should know what I'm talking about. The shower has a small dugout area that goes into the wall, which stores soap, shampoo, etc. Imagine having an inverse ledge, if that makes any sense, whereby it goes inside the wall rather than jutting out. This inverse ledge is the only part of the shower that can hold something raised above the ground. There is also always a towel or two thrown atop the glass wall that isn't the glass door. So I went into the shower to shower, and I remember the ledge being completely normal. I would have noticed the cup being in the shower because it would have been completely out of place and easily recognizable. As I was showering, I was either facing the inverse ledge or the glass wall with the towel, and suddenly I saw the freaking cup out of the corner of my eye at near my eye level, like 1.6 meters above the ground. I turned, and it makes a sound against the floor as it fell from out of nowhere. I just remember being literally stunned for like a minute and confused out of my mind. What makes this weird? One, there is no way the cup could have been in the inverse ledge, and furthermore, then suddenly fall on the glass wall side, which is on the left to the inverse ledge wall. Two, there's no way the cup could have been inside the towel or behind it, or something, as the towel was either flat or wouldn't have been able to hold the cup anyways. I did not interact with the towel as this happened. And third, there is no way the cup could have fallen from atop the shower walls, as it had no way to balance on the top. And even if it did, it didn't look out of the ordinary. And that is my only experience that causes me to doubt my sanity. In October, I was driving on Snoqualmie Pass late at night when a semi-truck drove through a barrier separating the westbound and eastbound lanes. No one was killed, but the truck was laying on its side across one lane, and between the three vehicles that had been hit and the debris from the barriers, both lanes were completely blocked. Traffic was stopped, and I was among the cars stuck on the pass with no clue about what had happened. A few hours later, they had enough of my lane clear, the one that didn't have a semi laying across it, that we were able to slowly continue driving. As we got closer to the wreck, we started to see the debris that had been moved to the side of the road, and eventually I was shocked to see an ambulance halfway over part of the broken barrier, with its front wheels on my side of the barrier, and the barrier completely crumbling around it. It had definitely been part of the accident, and had gone over the barrier. Not too far away was more of the cars that had been hit, and the sideways semi. I assumed that the ambulance had crashed on its way to help. I remember staring at it and wishing that I had a chance to take a picture, but I got several good looks at it. The idea of an ambulance being involved in an accident was crazy to me, and I just couldn't stop staring. I was on the phone with my mom and described what I saw, and also described it to my friends in a group message the next morning, before I had researched the accident. The next day, I went online to find out the story of what had happened, and reports did say that an ambulance had been involved, but when I saw pictures from the scene, I was surprised to see pictures of the ambulance on top of another car, not halfway over the barrier like I clearly remembered. I thought 2 ambulances must have been involved, and I asked about it on a Facebook post made by the department. The ambulance belonged to where they had reported the accident, and I asked if there had been 2 ambulances, and described what I saw. They commented back saying there was only one, and suggesting that the ambulance I had saw had been parked in a gap in the barrier to assist with the accident. But I didn't see an ambulance parked in a gap in the barrier. I saw an ambulance with 2 wheels in the air, resting on a crumbling barrier, pointing right into my lane as if it had crashed through it. So I'm still trying to work out what the heck happened. First time posting here, but I'm ridiculously puzzled, and I need to tell someone that won't think I'm insane. I went to bed last night after staying up and watching the ball drop. I read for a bit, took my dog out, and then I went to bed. Before going to bed, I realized that my apartment was a bit of a mess. Clothes on the floor, a few dishes scattered around, some plastic wrap left about from Christmas, and I planned to clean it all today. My dog and I went to my room, locked the door, and went to sleep. For context, I live alone in a second-story apartment. I have security cameras on my front door and back balcony, and also have a doggy cam pointed at my dog's crate in my bedroom, that also has my bed in frame. I rewatched the videos from last night, and there was no movement beside the usual stand up and stretch my dog does, and me tossing and turning a bit in my sleep. But when I woke up and walked out to my living room, it was clean. Clothes were picked up and in the washing machine, not running or full, dishes cleaned and put away in the cabinets, plastic from the Christmas presents thrown away. Everything was back in its usual place. And I've been trying to figure out what the hell happened. I have no history of sleepwalking, and the camera would have picked it up, and no one came into my house. I just can't figure it out, so I wanted to see if anyone has any kind of explanation or has experienced something like this before. To add, the CO levels in my apartment are fine. There's no evidence of any kind of gas leak. Downstairs neighbors had their detectors checked too, and it was fine. I'm pretty good at keeping up with my annual doctor visits and have screenings fairly often. Cancer, heart, and thyroid issues run in my family, unfortunately, but I'll make a note of it to discuss with my doctor if anything else happens. To address some of the questions and comments that have been left, I do not drink or take any recreational drugs. Any meds I take, I've been on for over 3 years with no issues. I have cameras and lock my bedroom doors because I'm relatively young and I live alone. I also have a legal background and understand the significance of evidence if anything were to ever happen. So that was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection. It is quite the glitchy reality that we live in, is it not? Definitely some oddities out there. Really great stories this week. Really appreciate those of you who let me use their stories or submit their stories to me. Always appreciated. Thank you so very much. I hope you all enjoyed this. And if you did, please hit that thumbs up button. And then if you didn't, you could also hit the thumbs down button if you choose. I'm not going to control you. It's your decision. That all said, you could also leave me a comment down below with the word of the week, which is coming up later, and hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel, don't hit it. It'll unsubscribe you, and that's not what you want. I hope. You can also join my Patreon or memberships down below, where for $1 a month, significantly less, you can get early access to content like this. So long as I'm ahead, you win, we all win, that's how it goes. Anyways, let's move forward to this whole word of the week thing that I do. Last week's word of the week was excellent, and a lot of you commented on the video with the word excellent. So thank you so very much to each and every single one of you. On screen now, obviously, if you're looking at the screen. If not, look now so you can see all the beautiful people who replied with the word of the week. Now, this week's word of the week is going to be a little different, a little more complicated than excellent. It's going to be nuance. Nuance, which means a subtle or slight degree of difference, as in meaning, feeling, or tone, or expression or appreciation of subtle shades of meaning, feeling, or tone. So, nuance. Good luck with that. Good word to use, and good word to have in your vocabulary And of course, I hope you can get me a sentence with that. And I will see you next time. But until then, my friends, I hope that you, do that thing that I say, which, if you need a reminder, is sleep well.